Mr. Howard, if you would introduce item number 6, please.
Yes, item number 6 is an information item dealing with the Santa Ana Regional Water Quality Control Board's proposed sector-specific industrial stormwater permit. The Santa Ana Regional Board was prepared to move forward with adoption of this, I think, about a month ago. I sent a letter expressing some concerns about the permit, specifically an issue of inconsistent treatment around the state and whether adoption of such a permit statewide might be more appropriate. I appreciate Kurt Berchtold has agreed to come to the water board, to the state water board, and tell us about in some detail about the permit. This is an information item only. I didn't really expect to get any direction necessarily from the board today, but I have told Kurt that I would try to get back to him by the end of the year regarding the letter that I sent, and my understanding is that his board would like to discuss this issue or take it up again in February of next year. Thank you.
Actually, before Kurt begin, I have a concern. Not that I'm prepared to, at least at the moment, provide any comments or direction to staff, but it does occur to me that this issue raises some significant policy questions for the board. And while you do a great job, Tom, of meeting individually with board members and providing a consensus approach, the disadvantage to that is I don't get to hear from my colleagues on their thoughts on these issues because I'm not supposed to talk to you about it when we're off the podium, off the dais. And so I think I, for one, would appreciate it if perhaps after the presentation and comments that we might perhaps engage in some discussion of these issues, reserving, of course, the ultimate direction for Tom to develop once he's met with us individually. But again, these are such significant policy issues that rather than just hearing the comments and then going off in our corners with Tom, I would ask for some discussion on the dais.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Kurt Berchtold, the Executive Officer for the Santa Ana Regional Board. I'm here this morning to talk to you about a proposed sector-specific general permit for stormwater runoff from scrap metal recycling facilities. That's quite a mouthful. We usually just call it the scrap metal permit for short. That permit that we developed was developed through a stakeholder-based process, and some of the stakeholders are here with me this morning. And what I would propose to do is to let some of the stakeholders speak first to give you some background on kind of the why and how this permit was developed. And then I would, after they explain that background, I can go through what the permit we developed includes. So
hopefully during that explanation we'll hear whether the stakeholders became involved as a result of a proposal from the regional board or whether the regional board became involved because of a proposal and concerns brought forward by the stakeholders.
it's the latter. But I guess with that, what I would suggest is that we have George Adams and Gary Brown, who are here this morning, address you to give you some further background.
I guess that means I get to go first. Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is George Adams. I'm the President and CEO of SA Recycling. I'm also the past chairman of ISRI, which is our national association, the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries. I'm here in my personal capacity for my company. I'm also here representing ISRI This was actually put to a formal vote at our chapter level, which represents the state of California. SA Recycling stands for Sims Adams, and Sims Metal Management also has facilities in Northern California. Between Sims and myself, I think we have almost 50 facilities in the state of California. I think it's, if you'll bear with me for a second, let me give a little bit of history of how I personally got involved in this whole situation. Under the old, or I guess it would still be the current permitting today, under the NOI process, we had a small scrapyard in Los Angeles, which was your traditional scrapyard. It had no controlled runoff. We had some concrete, mostly dirt. We had runoff different areas. We would sample the water, went off at the different runoff points, and based on what the results were, would try to make a few changes. And we got sued by the baykeepers. And it was a very painful process, and in that process, learned a lot about stormwater. The old way of doing the permit really didn't have any guidelines, and no one could meet CTRs, and so there was really no reason to even try, because it was something that was impossible to do. And all scrapyards, prior to the baykeeper starting to sue us, really just had uncontrolled runoff and did the best they could the way they had always done it for the last 50 years. In that process, we started having controlled discharge points, started putting in all of the equipment to try and make clean water and meet CTRs. And it was a very difficult process because no one's ever met CTRs before on a regular basis. It doesn't mean that someone can't meet them once in a while, but no one's ever met CTRs consistently, at least that we know of. And there's no equipment out there that we know of that will allow you to consistently meet CTRs. And so after 5 painful years of trying to meet this and spending a tremendous amount of money in legal fees, violating different orders, and it finally ended. And we immediately, within a few months later, got sued again. This time, the same attorneys went and got a new keeper and sued us again, the same facilities. And this, of course, the only difference was that we had spent millions and millions of dollars, and I'm not exaggerating when I say millions of dollars, to try and get clean water, and we're very smart, or not very smart, but much more educated in the process. And so in meeting with Gary Brown, who was the keeper, the new keeper that the attorneys had brought in to sue us, there was a big difference in that Gary Brown came out and looked at our facility and looked at everything that we'd done and realized that we weren't the people that he was trying to sue, and that we truly were trying to have clean water. And Gary and I sat down and started trying to come up with a plan, because our industry, and me being chairman at the time of the industry, our state industry here in California wanted to either file a lawsuit against the keepers in general, or try and change the law, or trying to come up with a solution to this, because we were just getting picked off right and left. And it didn't really matter how much money you spent unless you completely enclose your facility, or unless you do 100% infiltration. If you discharge stormwater, you were going to fail. And even if you passed most of the time, all you had to do was fail once or twice, and it was just like you'd done nothing, and you still could get sued. And the penalties at $25,000 a day make it impossible for you to ever fight it, so you end up settling and entering into consent decrees that you can't meet. And so Gary and I sat down, and Gary's the one that came up with the idea, because he's much better at it than me, of going to the regional board, because he had a good relationship. His organization is within Orange County and Inland Empire, which is on the Santa Ana Regional Board. And he felt that this board was a unique board in the sense that it would want to try and come up with a solution to this project. And so we sat down with them, and they were very interested in moving forward, and we developed a stakeholder group. We sent out notices to every single scrap facility that was in the region. We invited them to meetings. We invited them to participate. We had many, many meetings. People contributed money. to be part of the process, to pay for a facilitator, and the executive director of the regional board came to every single meeting that we had. Gary was at the meeting. We had attorneys, we had environmental people, we had people from our industry, many different people to develop this stakeholder, to go through this process to come up with the sector-specific permit that we have on place. And it's been a tremendous amount of work, but I'm very proud of what we've come up with. And I believe, after sitting on the boards on the national level, that this is the first time in the country that this has really ever been done and ever been come up with from the environmental side, our industry side, and the regional board side. I don't know of it being done anywhere else in the country. And I think it is a model that will be used across the country. The big thing that we need is we need a path to compliance. And just something as simple as storm size. What storm do you build for? Do you build for a 5-year storm, a 10-year storm, a 20-year storm, a 1-year storm? The law doesn't tell you. What size tanks, what size pumps, what type of filtration. We need direction on how to put this thing together, and this permit allows us this path to compliance. The biggest thing that I've heard that people speak against this permit on is that it's too expensive. They can't afford to do it. That it's just the big guys. It's just SA Recycling. Okay, I'll tell you right up front, SA Recycling is the largest scrapyard in the state of California. Sims Metal Management's the largest scrapyard in the world. Whether you're large or whether you're small, the current law says that we're supposed to produce clean water. And I didn't write that law, but I believe in the law as far as what we're trying to accomplish. A scrapyard, when you smash cars, when you recycle appliances, when you recycle all different types of things, you do tremendous good for the environment, reduces greenhouse gases. There's a lot of great things that happen. But in the process, you make contamination. If you don't control that contamination, then that contamination is going to roll right out onto the street and into the stormwater. The only way that you can control that contamination is to have some type of a central discharge point, have some type of settling tanks to slow it down to allow the solids and particles to come out, and go through some type of filtration. And that costs money. And if the state decides that they would prefer to allow the small yards to not have to do that and let that contamination go offside, that's certainly within the purview. But I still would like this permit to go forward, because what happens is that the baykeepers don't sue the little guys because they don't have any money. They sue the big guys. And so my company keeps getting sued, and I need a way that I have a path to compliance. And so if the board decides that they want to give the little guys variances, I mean, that's the board's prerogative. I'm not here to say that. But I do know that all of us in this industry need a path to compliance, and I would hope that the board, even if you allowed this to go on some type of a pilot plant or something like this, would allow our permit to proceed forward. My goal, ultimate goal, is to have this adopted on a statewide basis, because I have yards in every single region in the state. But sometimes you have to walk before you can run. And but at least in that region, at least in the the region where I have a lot of yards in the Santa Ana region, I would at least have a chance of not being sued by the baykeepers, or not by the baykeepers, but by the NGOs, because right now every single scrapyard in the state of California is open to be sued. And so, they're telling me, she's saying I need to leave time for other people to talk, so I'm gonna. Is there any questions?
Tracy's good at that. I have a couple of questions, but I'm going to let the ladies go first here.
Thank you. A quick question. During your discussions or negotiations, did the idea come up of a permit specific to just your company?
Ma'am, certainly not.
So why apply it to all the scrap metals recycler in the region, especially those little guys, as you spoke about? Why not just for your facility?
Ma'am, being chairman of our national association, this is a huge issue that was being talked about at our regional industry meetings in the state of California. And it was agreed and voted on by our state chapter that we would push for a statewide permit, start at the regional level, and then push for a statewide permit. The ISRI members, the bulk of the ISRI members, believe in this permit and don't want to be sued and want to have a have a path to compliance. Personally, I believe that the small yards that are complaining, most of them are not ISRI members, and I'm not saying that some aren't, but most of them are not ISRI members. Most of these are very small facilities that don't have any of the proper safeguards in. They don't really comply with the laws, but like I said, that's not my place to say.
And help me understand, ISRI, is there a sort of a size component?
No, there is no size. Anybody that handles scrap metal is allowed to be an ISRI member, or can join ISRI. And it's a fee based on the size company you are. It ranges from about $1,200 a year to on up, depending on the size of the company that you are. It's a democratic process, and so in that process, you have people that agree and will have disagree. One company, one vote. Doesn't matter how big you are. The fact that we have many scrap yards in the state of California, we get one vote. And it was unanimously voted on just as recently as last month that I would come up here and present when I knew that this meeting was happening, that I would come up here and present the fact that ISRI was supporting this. There was nobody at the meeting that spoke against it. At the last meeting that we had a month and a half ago, there was also no one that spoke against it. I'm not to say there aren't ISRI members against it, but this is something that ISRI supports very strongly, and on a national level, it's something that ISRI on a national level is trying to do. ISRI, as an organization, believes very strongly in producing clean water. You cannot produce clean water if you don't have one single discharge point, if you don't have a paved yard, if you don't cover contamination sources. And people say that that's too much money to do that. Well, in my opinion, they shouldn't be in the business, because you should not be allowed to pollute. And that's just what I believe. And I've been on both sides of the fence. I started out with my father in 1977 with one little tiny scrapyard. My first job was picking scrap metal out of the dump. I've been all sides of this thing. But the end of the day is that if you're going to be in our industry, you need to be a good neighbor. You can't pollute. That's just what I believe.
My other question to you is, I noticed in the draft permit that there are quite a few numeric effluent limits, and it's interesting that you would be standing here in such strong support of a permit with numerical effluent limits when we hear from so many others from the industry their concerns about this issue. I'm curious as to well, maybe someone else will address it, but how these numerical effluent limits were established, and what is your level of comfort in terms of their technical basis as well as your expected compliance with these numerical limits?
Thank you. It's a very good question. This process was, there was a lot of parties involved. You had the environmental people, you had the environmental representative from the baykeepers, or from the keepers that was on the side. You had the attorneys, you had the water board. There was a lot of people that were involved in this process. Obviously, I would love to see less testing, there's a lot of things that I would like to see less of, but I needed to put a permit that everybody would buy in on. And so in order to get other people's support on this thing, we had to agree to more testing. The things that were really important to me were storm size, were some type of a path to compliance by using numerical numbers and trying to get numbers. I can't meet CTRs. I hit them once in a while, but I can't meet them. That means that every single facility that I have in the state of California violates the stormwater law. That means that every single facility right now, any baykeeper, any lawyers for clean water, any type of those organizations could walk in and sue me at every single one of my yards, even though I could document and show you that over the last few years, I've spent over $10 million trying to make clean water. And yet every single facility I have will not meet the law. I'm a sitting duck. And I think the only reason I don't get sued right now is because I've been working so hard to change this, and Gary is helping with the keepers for them not to come after me. But I could easily they could easily come after me. If the board wanted to reduce the frequency of testing and override the other people, I mean, I'm not arguing that. I just need a path to compliance. I need a way that I don't keep getting sued.
Of course, if we overrode that, they'd sue us. So
I'm sorry?
if we overrode that requirement, they'd sue us.
You know, it's been a very strong learning process for me.
I have, you have a question? I've got a couple of questions for you. I guess first and foremost, something that has grated on me on this is I don't mind having a proposed regulation come from a region at all. That isn't it. Maybe this is something that should have come from us. The question I have, certainly, and you alluded to it by virtue of the number of facilities you have in different regions, is I don't see anything that is environmentally specific to the Santa Ana region. It would seem to me that if the criteria you're trying to put in place is good enough in Santa Ana, that it would probably fit someplace else. So I guess I have a question as to why your organization did this in Santa Ana. I assume it's simply because of the threat of litigation was specific to that area and this developed there. And
actually, sir, we looked at all the possibilities of whether we should try and bring it to state level or not. And at the end of the day, I had a very good relationship with the Santa Ana board. I'd known them for a long time because that's where I started. Gary was the one that proposed it, and he had a very strong relationship with them. And so when I proposed it to ISRI, we felt that we had the best chance of success of getting this approved at our local level and proving it and then taking it up statewide. But we wrote the permit with the idea that it would go statewide, and we tried to make it a generic permit as something that we could take statewide. My goal is for this permit to be adopted on a statewide basis, and whether, you know, going through this, I didn't have a relationship with you fine people up there like I did with the board, and it's a lot closer for me to drive to their office than to come up here, and we felt we just had a better chance of starting locally and proving ourselves and then taking it on a statewide basis.
the difficult thing, and when you strictly look at the law, it shouldn't be difficult, but the thing that is pretty clear to me is that if this goes into statewide law, for all the reasons you've very well articulated, there's going to be an enormous attrition in the scrap metal industry, because, you know, the idea of providing some special dispensation to people that are small or in this geographic area or that is never going to fly. And certainly just by the very nature of your business, which I'll be the first to acknowledge it contributes a lot to the environment just by cleaning things up and concentrating, but wherever you have concentrated your efforts, I don't know how in the world you do keep it clean. I appreciate the fact you're there, and certainly we use those facilities in another life of mine, but it would seem that, you know, without much doubt, this will cause further concentration in the scrap metal industry, and maybe that's necessary, I don't know, but I can't imagine that that would not happen.
Yeah, you know, sir, if I could respectfully comment on that, I actually think that the entrepreneurial people that are in our industry are incredibly strong. And the one thing's for sure, a large company like myself will never beat an entrepreneur. You know, he works, he's loading the truck, his wife's on the scale, he or she is so much closer to the business, and there's so much, it's theirs. And they're very, very strong, tough people. I know from coming from that side, from starting as a one facility operation, working alongside my father, I know how that goes. And I know the big guys that tried to, you know, beat me or put me out of business, and you can't beat an entrepreneur. You can't beat them. What we're proposing on this permit sounds like it's going to put people out of business. I think very, very few people will go out of business. I think the only people that will go out of business are the people that aren't real scrap yards. Because to have a central discharge point is not that difficult. You know, to concrete your yard runs better anyway. And to be a good neighbor, eventually all the cities right now are going around, forget stormwater, you know, they don't want the track off, they don't want the dirt going out in their street. This is coming anyway. I mean, anybody who doesn't believe that you're going to have concrete facilities and you're going to have this kind of stuff they're living in fantasy land. And the small scrap yards, a half-acre scrap yard, to control your water to one point, to put a tank in, to put to put filtration in, that's the minimum if you're going to be in this business. And these people are very tough. I understand that they're going to fight and say that this is going to put them out of business. I just disagree. I've been competing against these people too long. They're way too tough. And this isn't going to put them out of business. That's just my personal opinion.
I appreciate your candor. Believe me, I do. Thank you, sir. Mr. Brown, you come up with your brass knuckles and tell us your side of the story.
I have a PowerPoint, which I'm like George, I like to just go on and talk, but I'm trying to discipline myself with a PowerPoint. Okay. My name is Gary Brown. I'm the Executive Director of the Orange County Coastkeeper and the Inland Empire Waterkeeper. Oh, I'm supposed to do this. Well, I missed one. Oh, okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. That was very interesting.
Okay. I'm rolling.
Roll it forward to go. Roll it back to move and
Okay.
so just roll back that way.
Just to give you some background, is some years ago we took on the major developers, the residential developers, because we found that they were not at all complying with the statewide construction permit. And we decided if we took on some of the major developers in court, that the industry would get the message and they would clean up. And that's exactly, after 4 or 5 lawsuits, that's exactly what happened. The Building Industry Association started having seminars. I even went to their meetings and saw the PowerPoints. We have to clean up. And so fast forward a couple of years, about 3 or 4 years, and we thought that the strategy, the same strategy would work to clean up scrapyards. And so I know we started litigating some of the major scrapyards, and Santa Monica Baykeeper and San Francisco Baykeeper and the Ventura Coastkeeper. Over the years, we've all litigated multiple scrapyards. My frustration is after 8 or 9 lawsuits, we were very successful in cleaning those up, but we weren't doing anything for the industry. And so, you know, we were looking for a better way. And in the process of those lawsuits, 2 federal judges basically published rulings that CTR did apply to scrapyards at the discharge point or the end of the pipe. And so, as we said, you know, basically the gutter is the receiving water in front of your facility, even though we all know CTR is a receiving water standard. And so that is the basis by which we have tried to clean up. I wanted to show you just a couple photos. These aren't unique, these photographs. This is what we're trying to clean up. And you think maybe a small one isn't so bad. How much pollution do you think a small scrapyard can generate? And without patronizing, this happens to be an SA facility in Anaheim. And this is a large facility. But yet you can see the management, the roof over the scrap piles, a number of BMPs in place that is a clean yard. And this is by no means to say a small yard can't do this, because they can. The numbers are smaller, the area is smaller, it's all proportioned to your size. To correct one thing George said about the keepers in our, originally, he's absolutely right, is we were using contingency law firms, and they like the big operators because they were sure to get paid. And we saw a real reluctance for the small yards to do, to not only get involved with our process, but you know, start cleaning up, because we really felt that they were under the radar screen. And so we, with our own internal lawyers, are litigating and have litigated small scrapyards, and we've cleaned them up. And the numbers at the end of the consent decree are much, much smaller than what they are with the large scrapyards, because we've quit using outside firms and we've cut the cost. So we're trying to basically clean the industry up. This is a report that was done by your agency in mid-May, basically outlining citizen enforcement lawsuits and who is suing and who are the attorneys. This is a very long document, because it contains many of the consent decrees. The problem with our strategy, again, like I said, is the industry wasn't responding to our what we were trying to do. See, and I agree with George, and I to the objection of a lot of the people on my side of the table, I felt that CTR is an unachievable standard for a facility to meet 365 days a year. They may occasionally do it, but I don't think it's good government to have standards that are unachievable. And so that was a big motivation for me. The goal is to clean up the industry, not close it down. And I think that's something that we're very sensitive to. One of the problems with all these lawsuits, and I'm the first to admit, is that it's diverting dollars from scrapyards that we would actually rather see them go into BMPs to clean up rather than pay law firms and spend money on lawsuits. So that's why we decided to go after a permit. We wanted to develop achievable standards. We wanted to provide a clear path, like George said, a clear path to compliance. You do this and this and this and different BMPs, and have mass loading reductions, and then at the tail end, you know, we'll look at advanced treatment. Develop quality data. Now, this is very important, and it was suggested in some of your questions, is that the data we want to develop is basically the assumption of this whole permit is you have a couple phases of different types of BMPs that will, as I said, reduce the mass reduction, reduce the mass loading. That amount of stormwater that's left, you put through an advanced treatment. And what we're doing is monitoring at different yards, at different yards that have these advanced treatment systems set up and operating. In a rainstorm, we want to monitor the influent and the effluent of that system. And the goal of that is to develop a standard that's basically best available technology today. It's not something pie in the sky. It's something that if you do BMPs, if you have this mass loading reduction, if you have advanced treatment, the standard will be based on what is available today. And that.
Let me interrupt you just quickly on that, on BAT. Are the devices that are being used off-the-shelf devices? Do several manufacturers, or
Right.
do several
Right.
People put them out?
There's different BMPs out there that are proprietary manufactured BMPs. The two main ones, a Stormwater RX, and another one is a Storminator, and there's some other off things of those. And what we're trying to do is get a full mix of the various different types of equipment in place, operating in a yard in a rainstorm.
Okay.
And so that's why the data is so important, and there's no other plan to create that kind of data that we're aware of. And this also is with quality insurance and definite protocols and training of everybody that that does this.
Gary, do you have, excuse me, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Do you have, is there a pilot out there that, will give both yourself and the industry comfort that these numeric limits are achievable? I mean, that the industry is so unique in the fact that it's taking scrap and putting things in a million little pieces that were formerly full of oil and all kinds of things. I mean, it's not just an everyday incidental type of pollution. Certainly the threat is there. Are you and Mr. Adams comfortable that with the technology that's there, that these goals are in fact achievable? I mean, concrete and roofs are all one thing,
I think they're achievable because in 3 years of data, the standards will be based on the performance of those BMPs, and so that's how they'll be derived, and so yes.
Let me just interrupt. I think what they're proposing is that BAT would be the standard. And so once they have determined what BAT, what the range is for BAT, that's the standard.
But that doesn't say that it won't continue to evolve and change
exactly.
every year.
Continuing, and as technology improves, the standard could also change over permit renewals and other things, and that's part of the plan. As far as the things that I mentioned here, the last bullet point is in certainly my opinion, the IGP or the draft IGP does not provide any of the above bullet points. That's why we are pursuing this sector specific permit. Very quickly, I after meeting George and after touring his facility and seeing how much money he invested, why would I sue somebody who's trying as hard as he is and investing the amount of money he has? And so I proposed to him that we work together and go to the regional board. I've had a long relationship with the staff at the regional board, and as we all know, the Region 8 is known for a stakeholder process, and we've been on numerous stakeholder processes. And so I went to actually Jerry. It was right in the transition period of Jerry Thibault and Kurt. They both met. George and I went, and Michael was there. And basically we asked them their thoughts if we could do a stakeholder permit. Unlike the multi-million-dollar, multi-year stakeholder permits we're used to, we would do this for cheap and quick. And we wound up doing it from April to October, and brought in people. The industry funded the process and the consultants, and we went forward. But we had initial meetings with the facility owners. At our first meeting, we had around 50 facility owners. We explained them the idea to go forward, the idea to develop this permit. We invited them to participate, and many did, and many didn't. But it was their decision not to. And so we wound up with a committee, and as George has said, it's made up of the people you see there. And then our facilitator, maybe some of you know him, was Larry McKinney, who was the stormwater manager for Orange County and now works for Celeste at SAPA as counsel for SAPA. And he knows this issue backward and forward, so he was very helpful as a facilitator. We held numerous meetings. We convened 3 industry meetings to inform them, invited the whole list that the regional board had, their list, and the list that I'm assuming ISRI had. I went and reported the progress on this to the greater environmental community in a meeting with attorneys and NRDC and Heal the Bay and others to tell them what was going on. I wasn't asking them to support this. I was asking them to let us run with this and see where it went. And so the Region 8 prepared 5 drafts, and they held 1 workshop and 2 hearings. Why do we need the permit now is basically without this permit, nothing changes. There's going to be ongoing litigation. which we've covered in detail. We don't feel the draft IGP covers and provides the guidance to this unique industry, because as the chairman was just saying, is that this is one of the few industries that has absolutely no control what comes in the gate. Other manufacturing processes, they know exactly what raw materials they're using. This industry is unique. And right now, many facilities are spending money on lawsuits, and there's more and more salesmen knocking on their doors with different BMPs, but they're investing money in BMPs without any assurance that that's going to get them anywhere. And again, we want to develop the data. What I'm asking is basically, you know, as George said, the committee's goal has been the statewide adoption of a permit. And I'm not so sure it's all ready for that, because it would take basically, in many ways, starting over with the political process, the public education process, but we would also, if the state does determine that they would like to take this, we would like assurance that the permit would stay intact and keep the numeric standards. We're really concerned because the things we hear on the draft IGP is that there won't be numeric standards. And now if this can stand on its own, you guys can figure that out. You have the answers. The alternative would be if you would support Region 8 in its adoption of the permit in February, and monitor the progress, and let us tweak this and work out some of the details that need to be worked out, and see how it goes. So basically, in closing, this has been a tremendous investment by the staff, by the regional board. It's been a tremendous investment by all of us. We're in our kind of third year of trying to come up with this permit. And I think importantly too is remember last when the environmental community and the industry came together and actually wanted you to approve a permit that was even stronger than what you have. That's can't happen too often. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, but thank you very much for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you, Gary. You did well. You didn't get one of those reminder notes from Tracy there. That's good. Mr. Griffin, would you like to come forward?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to be here and make my presentation. This is my first time before the state board. My name is Roger Griffin. I'm the Director of Environmental Compliance for the Ecology Auto Parts Companies. I'm a registered professional engineer. I've been in the environmental field for 40 years. I have a master's in engineering. I'm a registered licensed chemical engineer in California. Taught for 10 years at UCLA. I've written 2 textbooks that are worldwide in their publication. I'm representing a company that is, back up. A company that is in this state about 25 facilities in the recycling business. We're in 5 regions with 3 SIC codes. Our concerns are many with the state permit, and we have considerably more concerns with the permit promoted by the Santa Ana region. There's a significant number of issues that are presented here. They're procedural, technical, administrative, economic, and policy, all of which are significant and frankly have not been addressed. And I've had input to the state board on their draft permit last spring, and on several occasions to the Santa Ana Regional Board. Some of the issues that we deal with, I can go into if you so desire. We are supportive of a statewide permit, one that has limits on it, has BMPs on it, that are reasonable and attainable. I'm an engineer, I'm not an attorney, I'm not an environmental advocate. I deal with real numbers, with real solutions. If it's not a real number, it's not a real solution. And I don't think anybody in society today promotes dirty water. We all have an obligation to clean things up, and our company supports that. I personally support that. As I say, I've been in this industry, the environmental field, for both government, as a consultant, and as an employee for 42 years. I have some understanding of the issues that are being raised here. We do support the statewide permit. However, we are strongly opposed to the Region 8 permit. I think it sets a dangerous precedent. I think it induces greater confusion, both for the companies who have multiple facilities, but certainly anyone located in Region 8, and it'll induce confusion on the part of your enforcement people. I run across inspectors all the time that are looking around saying, well, over there they do this, why aren't you doing that here? Well, different regulations, different standards creates incredible chaos. Procedurally, excuse me, I mentioned that as one of the issues. Regarding the committee, there is no committee that was set up by the regional board. This was an ad hoc pull together on the part of SA Recycling and Gary Brown's organization. It does not have universal sector-wide support, flat out. Now, I don't know how many folks here are from some of the other Region 8 industries. I'll let them speak for themselves. But that is certainly a concern. Secondly, technical issues, concerns. The NELs, CTR, which give you a permit violation of the Clean Water Act, which is an open invitation to a lawsuit, are not achievable, flat out. Mr. Adams has alluded to that, Mr. Brown's alluded to that. We have looked at that ourselves, both our stormwater data of all of our facilities. We spent $50,000 in the last 5 months setting up an on-site pilot program. We have taken samples before and after technologies. We've gone to a dozen different vendors. Not one will guarantee that they can meet the CTR or NEL standards on an ongoing basis, flat out. If it's not achievable, why have a numeric standard? But we've gone to vendors. As I say, we had a pilot study using the Stormwater RX technology. It didn't work, flat out. We have one of our facilities has a independent, site-specific NPDES permit. It's the gold standard at one of our facilities. Tertiary treatment, filtration, coagulation, sedimentation, and all the rest, and it will not meet the NELs, the CTR standards 20% of the time.
Can I interrupt you just briefly? Because particularly given your expertise in this area, would you agree that setting, that the goal may be under current best management practices, or BAT, best available technology more precisely, may not make the ultimate goal attainable today, given what we've got. But over time, it is possible that that goal could be attained. So if you have BAT standards established that give you what is possible given the best available technology that's out there, while it may not get you all the way, as that technology evolves, you could get there. Is that, am I off on that?
I think you are. Speaking as a technical individual, pardon me, there's a concept called asymptote. You can treat things to a certain level. You can lower and lower and lower concentrations in a discharge. But after a while, no technology will get you below that asymptote, no matter how much money you spend, unless you do something like literally storing all the water and evaporating it, or have no discharge, which, I think it's a good idea, because soil is a tremendous filtration media, but there's other issues raised there. But as far as technology, no. You will always have something, because no technology in the physical world will get down to the low part per billion level. Apart from biological activity, something like that, and that's different issue. I think for the most part, we're dealing with the metals concentrations that are in the CTR standards. The draft permit from the Regional Board 8 has part per billion levels. And as I said, we've looked at data from our own yard with tertiary treatment. It doesn't meet that. I'm not talking about passive mechanical filters. I'm talking about pretty powerful tertiary levels. Can't meet it. Why have a rule that cannot, with any technology, meet the standard? Okay.
Could we ask Kurt to respond to that?
Sure.
You know, I actually have a PowerPoint that goes through the nuts and bolts of the permit in a little bit of detail, which after Mr. Griffin's comments, if you'd like, I could give you that. But in short, he's focusing on CTR-based NELs that are included in our draft permit. Those are optional. The facilities would only have to comply with those if they choose to avoid the three-phase BMP-based approach that leads to BAT, BCT. So under that three-phased approach, those CTR-based numbers do not apply. And I would also add that Mr. Griffin participated in the regional board workshops and hearings that were held on the permit, so he has provided comments to us through our process.
Okay. Not sure to proceed. But again, based on hard numbers, our own facilities with tertiary treatment, with pilot studies we've done this August and September at one of our facilities chosen specifically for a pilot test, it cannot be met. Now, if it is indeed true that these are options, I'd say fine, then let's spell it out, or better yet, dump it. Why give somebody a hard standard with a 60-day compliant period to come into compliance with those numbers, or you join a group and you've got several years and you keep looking at the numbers? That doesn't make any sense to me, unless you have literally rainfall, and I've provided data to the state board last April showing that dust fall alone on a Teflon sheet would not meet some of the standards, regardless of your SIC code. So there are significant, again, technical issues. We talk about in this permit a rain event action plan, and I've had comments on that. Trying to anticipate rain events 3 days in advance and speed up your BMPs on the site is foolhardy. You're wasting your money. Why not just say every Wednesday we're going to do these 17 things? Far more effective all the way along the line. Administrative concerns. Again, multiple sites like our facility does, multiple agencies, multiple SIC codes. It's far more effective, cost-wise, personnel, all the rest, to have our company have one set of doing things, one way of doing things for all of the, even the same SIC codes in different areas. If the state board so opts to go with this type of a sector-specific permit, then let's make it statewide, because that's the only way you will get a, quote, level playing field for those who still plan on being in business. Our company is big enough, we plan on remaining in business. Okay, we will do everything we can to remain in compliance. That's my job title. Okay. Economic issues, those have been alluded to already. As I've told the board here and the regional board, a lot of these structural BMPs are going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. This may not be the appropriate time with our economy being in the state that's in to do that. Policy issues, you've got, as I mentioned, jurisdictional issues, potential unfair advantage to other states or competitors. If the regional board moves forward with this, it induces some of the issues. an additional layer of registration or certification. It's prohibited to have someone who is not a QSD do some of these SWIPs. I've been doing them for 20 years. But that will be cutting certain people out of a job because they may not have this QSD. Long story short, I guess that I'm requesting that the state board send a letter to the Santa Ana region indicating their opposition to their regional permit as it stands right now, and make the proviso in there that the state board reserves the right to vacate that action. That is my request. I will leave any other comments. I have many more comments, but I will pull back, unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. In a moment, we're going to take a break so I don't violate my own personal CTR, which is my coffee tolerance requirement. But I think Tam has a question of Mr. Laufer before we take a 10-minute break, and then we will resume with this item.
I suggested at the beginning of this item that the board engage in a discussion. However, after hearing the last commenter, I'm fairly certain that should the regional board proceed in adopting this permit, that it might be petitioned to us. In light of that, Mr. Laufer, perhaps you provide some guidance in terms of the level of discussion we might engage in without casting assertions about predeterminations?
Well, I would urge the board members to be cautious because obviously you only have a partial record before you, and there's a lot of evidentiary basis that's behind the regional board staff's proposal that was available to the regional board members. But there are some higher level policy issues, and if the board members have concerns about particular policy issues or even feelings on those policy issues, I'm comfortable with the board expressing them. It is important to remember, and I certainly both appreciate and think it's an important acknowledgement that Ms. Dodek had at the beginning of this item, that this is an opportunity for information exchange amongst the board members. In terms of the direct request for the state board being made to the state board members today to write a letter to the Santa Ana board, obviously this was not noticed up as an action item, so the board is not going to be taking any action. It is an opportunity for the individual board members, though, like I said, though, to express thoughts, concerns that they have about the big picture policy issues here.
And you're comfortable with us discussing that, even though it sounds like in addition to the technical issue, the policy aspects may also be part of any petition?
I'm comfortable with it being discussed. Obviously,
we can always recuse all of ourselves.
The board members will have the opportunity. I mean, if this item, this is all hypothetical at this point in time, but if the Santa Ana board were to take up this item and there would be a petition, you would have to consider the full record that comes before you. And, as a policy, while a board member may have an inclination, I don't think any of you would be predisposed, and I would encourage you not to be predisposed to a particular outcome, but instead to say, look, based on what I have heard so far, here are my feelings, and obviously those are feelings that can be revisited in the event that there is a petition. One of the things that I do expect is that, this particular informational item is being recorded. There will be a DVD available, and in the event, I would actually encourage the Santa Ana board to include this discussion in their administrative record if it goes back to the Santa Ana board. But in the very least, in the event that that hypothetical future action of the Santa Ana board is petitioned to the state board, a record of this proceeding would be included in the petition record. So, with that, I do think it is important that the board have an opportunity to hear the informational exchange today, and that you have the opportunity amongst yourselves to talk about some of the policy issues, recognizing that if you see it in the future, there may be very important differences and more fully developed issues associated or support for some of those policy determinations that you would need to revisit at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to take a break until about 1/4 after. Thank you.